What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Five Red Lights. My name is Jesse Finver, and with me, as always, Howard Goldberg. Howie, how we doing?
We're doing all right. We had a little bit of a firecracker of a weekend in not just F1, but
Racing?
motor racing.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a hell of a weekend.
I gotta say, I missed the entire weekend. I was away. I was traveling, and I'll tell you guys where I was traveling. Actually, I told you last week. I went to France. And I visited a very famous racetrack, which we'll get into later. But first, we have another very famous racetrack to talk about, and one that we'll possibly be seeing for the last time. Imola was this past weekend, and like you said, it was a firecracker of a race weekend overall, but good race in Italy.
Very good race. And I think that it obviously was not what people were expecting. People were expecting a bit of a processional, bit of a parade, a little bit like what we usually see in Monaco. There's only the one DRS zone, the one real overtaking opportunity down into Tamburello, which is it's turn 2, but it looks like turn 1 because turn 1 is like barely a kink to the left in that main straight. But Imola really delivered. It was really nice to see. I think people had kind of forgotten what the track was totally all about because obviously in 2023, because of the horrible flooding in the region, the race didn't happen. And then last year it was an absolute clunker. So I think people had kind of forgotten what Imola can produce. And this weekend, despite all the talk about cars being too big for the track and this and that, we got a show.
Yeah, it was a really great weekend. But I only watched the race. So most of the weekend I missed because I was away. So why don't you walk us through, how everything, well, at least walk me through what went down this weekend because you've been hyping it up. So I want to hear how this exactly went down.
Yeah, well, first off, we have to recognize we're not calling this by the correct name. We just keep saying Imola. And I'm going to look down at my notes because I want to get this right. But this was the Formula One AWS Gran Premio del Made in Italy E del Emilia Romagna 2025.
Do you think they have enough sponsors?
I do not know. But yeah, so repeat what I just said at that race. It kind of started early. FP1, we had our first incident on track, first couple incidents. There was an impeding incident between Yuki and Franco Colapinto. Franco's first session on track this year. He impeded Yuki. Yuki kind of gave him a hand gesture, like threw his hands up, like, "What are you doing, man? Like, get out of the way. That's dangerous." And that seemed to be that. It kind of seemed like it was over, but this would eventually flare up on off track, and we'll get into that later. But then the other incident was Gabriel Bortoleto crashed into almost the exact same spot that Ayrton Senna crashed into. Obviously not quite the impact, but he messed up his car. And that ended the session with a red flag a few minutes from the end. In terms of pace, it was McLaren. They were 1-2. They were fast. Not a surprise to anybody. FP2, it was Isaac Hadjar's turn to bring out a red flag this time. Spun into the barrier, but was able to keep it moving until he got beached in the gravel. So practice sessions, we saw them pretty disrupted this weekend. Again, McLaren was the fastest 1-2. Not a surprise to anybody. They looked incredible in their qualifying simulations. FP3, once again, McLarens were the fastest. Williams showed a lot of pace. Aston Martin was starting to show a little bit. And it was really interesting. It was starting to set up for a nice qualifying. Also have to mention Kimi Antonelli in his first home race at Mercedes as an Italian driver, driving in Imola, the first of his 2 home races this year. And they did nothing to kind of take pressure off of him, at least from the public perception.
What do you mean?
Well, first off, Toto Wolff wasn't there, which it's not a criticism. I think it's amazing that Toto chose to be at his son's graduation at USC, University of Southern California. But so for one, not having that main support of the team principal who's believed in you all along. But Toto aside, they have other support structures in place. I'm not concerned about that aspect of it. I know the team had his back, but it was more so everything else that was happening. Like, he brought his entire class to the racetrack one day for like a field trip. Like, they were all like hanging out, playing soccer in the paddock.
Love that.
The entire Bologna soccer team, like from Serie A, that had won the Coppa Italia 2 days earlier, showed up in the paddock, and they were all excited to meet Kimi. It's his favorite team. It's like you think to yourself, yeah, these are all good things. But at the same time, it's an 18-year-old kid who's also trying to reconcile the pressure of driving at his first race. And now you have all these people coming and saying, we're so excited for you. We want to see you do well and this and that. And I think pressure mounted. And I think it's fair for pressure to mount in that situation.
He's a kid.
Hard to blame him. Exactly.
It's like your favorite sports team shows up and all your classmates are there and you're 18 years old and your boss isn't there. And you're like, I mean, this is your first home race.
Yeah. And it's truly
it makes
home.
A lot of sense.
It's truly home. Like, the nearest city to Imola in Italy is Bologna. Like, it's truly his home race. It's 20 minutes from his house. So It was awesome. It was really cool to see him. He seemed very happy all weekend, which was nice. I mean, Kimi always seems happy. He's got that kind of personality. But yeah, it was really cool. Cool little weekend. Going into quali, man, right off the bat, it was fireworks. I don't know what you saw of this, but Yuki lap 1 of Q1 was just pushing way too hard. And he admitted that himself. He was going Q3 limit on Q1 and ended up spinning, flipping his car, hitting the barrier hard. Thank God for the catch fencing. Man. Yeah, that looked like a brutal hit. And
I saw it. It was terrifying to see that.
Yeah.
That you never want to see any driver, any racer have to go through that.
Yeah, and it's just you're just glad to see him walk away without any injury. Forget about being alive. I think we're at a point in motorsports where you don't hold your breath for a driver to not die when they crash, but to see a driver walk out of an impact like that and not even like be limping it's pretty astounding.
It's something to be said about the safety measures that have taken place, what they've done to make this sport safer.
Which we've said a lot of times. Can criticize FIA for a lot of things, but not that. Anyway, I mean, yeah, all four corners of suspension on that car were totaled. the wheels were like
I imagine so. Yeah,
it was crazy. Then I guess the next big thing, Fernando. I mentioned Aston started showing pace in a little bit in practice. Fernando, you look up in Q3, all of a sudden he's sitting P5. So where the hell did this come from Aston Martin? You know? But it's a huge takeaway that I want to mention later on. This is the first upgrade out of their new wind tunnel. So that's an
Ah,
interesting discussion that we'll have later on after we talk about the race. But so you had Fernando in P5, you had Lance Stroll also in the top 10. You had both Williams cars qualifying top 10. Um, you had, I mean, and what that meant essentially is where's the room for Ferrari? you know, you
yeah.
have you have two Williams, you have two Astons, that's four cars. You have two McLarens, that's six. You have George and Max, that's eight. All right, there's two spots left. And guess what? Ferrari did not get either one of them. It
Yeah.
was one of those things that you say Ferrari's been struggling, but they're coming home. And when they race in Italy, you expect just a little more power in that engine. For whatever reason, you expect it. And we didn't see it.
I could not believe when I saw the results. I could not believe that they lost out to not only Aston Martin, not only Williams, and Williams has been honestly just as like nearly as good as Ferrari this year, but they lost out to an Alpine and a Racing Bulls. And
Yeah. Which
Hadjar's
I
been
do want
good,
to say,
and Pierre is a good driver, but
I
that
do
is
want to say,
it's unacceptable on your at your home race.
I do want to say, right before qualifying started, I said, look out for Pierre Gasly Q3 today.
What made you high on Pierre Gasly this week?
He looked good in practices. I know I didn't mention it a couple minutes ago, but Pierre Gasly looked good in practices. And I think it's been a trend where throughout the season, we've seen him at certain tracks be able to put his car top 7, top 6 in certain sessions. So I
I
think
feel
there's something there. They just don't have anything remotely close to a complete car or
I
a
feel
good
bad
race
for
car.
Pierre because he's a good
Yeah,
driver, and he's not gonna he doesn't.
he's a
I can't imagine.
phenomenal driver.
I can't imagine he wants to leave Alpine. I mean, he's French, and it's a French team. I can't imagine he wants to leave and give up on his home country's team, but he deserves way better than what he's been getting from Alpine, especially this season. It's been very disappointing, and he's just too good to be finishing where he's been finishing. I'm happy that he got into Q3 and that you know, we had a decent showing from him this weekend, despite how the race ended, or how the race went for him, going into the gravel at one point, and he deserves better. Anyway,
Yeah, I mean, there's no denying his talent. This is a guy who won in Monza and in AlphaTauri.
yeah. So,
Huh.
what else? What else we got from qualifying?
Um. Okay. Also from qualifying, George Russell in Q3. Let's not skip ahead. Q1, end of Q1. Franco Colapinto pushing on his second lap ends up putting it in the wall. He had already put himself in through Q2. So basically he brought out the red flag. Session ended. He
That was a controversial red flag, I heard.
Oh, yep, you're right. Session did not end. There was time for another run for everybody, and oh boy,
This was
Gabriel
crazy. I didn't
Bortoleto.
watch this, but this is crazy.
Gabriel Bortoleto was sitting P15 at the time, and no, I was originally right. The red flag happened at the very end of the session.
Yeah.
Bortoleto was sitting P15. Ollie Behrman was on a flyer. Coming around the last corner, looked like his time was plenty good enough. And he crossed the line, and you can see from the onboard, from Ollie's onboard, he crosses the line, and then second and a half, 2 seconds later, you see a big board hanging from, the overpass that starts flashing red. That's the red flag. So from anybody watching onboards, it was clear as day. Oliver Behrman passed the line before the red flag was displayed on track. The FIA, and by the way, that time was good enough to put Ali up into P10. So he would have been through with plenty of cushion. And they would have dropped Bortoleto out of Q2 and put Colapinto P15. That's irrelevant because Colapinto shunted and he was out of the qualifying. He would start wherever he ended up. He would have started P15. The FIA just ruled against Oliver Behrman. They said that according to their timing, the red flag was 3 seconds before he crossed the line. Now, my issue with this is the red flag, in my opinion, is when it shows up on the boards. Because there's no freaking way for a driver to know that it's a red flag until it's shown on the leg boards. Like, it doesn't take that much thought, you know? And it's one of those situations where the FIA wasn't willing to say, yeah, we were wrong. We got that wrong. And that's something that Oliver Behrman alluded to. He said, you know, I'm not expecting anything because once they make their decision, they're not going to change it. And it's really hard to disagree with him on that. They do not like admitting that they're wrong. So it was really tough for Ollie. He deserved a lot more. And I think they really need to look at those situations of, is it when we push the button or is it when the message is actually shown?
It's so unprofessional. It's so beyond unprofessional and unserious. And the FIA is frankly a joke for what they did to Ollie Behrman this week. I can't. And this is like a trend. This is a long-standing trend where the FIA just makes baffling decisions. And I mean,
and won't explain themselves.
Yeah,
I mean,
sometimes they do. Sometimes
but
they do the right thing. Sometimes they don't. But a lot of the time, they make the wrong decision, and it's clearly wrong, and they will refuse to admit wrongdoing. And this is another example of that. It's a turnoff to fans. It pushes fans away. This is a sport that has exploded in popularity, but is struggling with TV ratings. And people love going to the gate races. They love showing up, but they don't watch it on TV. And when you have things like this happen, when you're trying to grow and expand your sport, especially in the United States, for a U.S. team, and you're going to do Haas like that, a team that's honestly gone way higher than anybody expected this season. And I mean, this was the first time that they had a DNP, right? Or DNF, excuse me, a DNF.
I believe so.
All season. You know, they've finished every single race. They've done a great job. And Ollie deserved to get into Q2. And this is just unacceptable from the FIA. I would say I'm disappointed, but I'm really not, just because it's expected at this point for them to make bad decisions and then refuse to admit wrongdoing. Whatever. I mean, sucks for Ollie. It was a footnote on the weekend, but just a baffling decision by them.
I totally agree.
All right.
The next notable thing that I thought was, fast forwarding to Q3, most of the cars were on the soft tires, which was the first time this compound had ever been brought to a racetrack, the C6 tire. It's a step softer than they had last year. So this year's medium tire was the soft tire from last year, the C5. And that's the tire George Russell chose to qualify on for his second run in Q3. And it helped him jump up above Lando Norris. it looked like his tires held on really well through the third sector, and it made a huge difference. Max Verstappen put in a great lap for P2, but said that his tires fell off at the end of the lap. So that really could have been the difference for Lando between starting P3, P4, P5.
Yeah.
For George, I mean.
Yeah. George just keeps on trucking along. We talked about it preseason. Like, is he gonna Toto put his trust in him? And all he's done, I mean, I don't think has he.
I
I
mean,
think this was the first week where he finished outside the top 5. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's first time in 11 races.
Yeah, and he
Going
does
back
he
a
goes
few into last year.
he goes Q3 or P3
He does it
in
so
qualifying.
quietly.
I know, it's just he just keeps on trucking along, and he can. These sorts of performances are what makes me think of eventually one day, if Mercedes gets the right engine and the right car, he can be a world champion.
Exactly.
He's
That's
just
what
consistent.
makes me say. That's what makes me say he is exactly what a lot of people think Lando Norris is.
Yeah,
And
you've been saying that.
That's because when he has an opportunity to deliver, it is very rare that he doesn't.
Yeah, I like George
Very
Russell,
rare.
man. I like him. He's got a great personality. He is consistent. He works hard. He's earned this spot with Mercedes.
Yeah. Which leads me to also
Yeah.
Lando being in P4. Lando admitted himself that he made a mistake on his qualifying lap. And
Good
that
for
it
Lando.
wasn't the car. No, honestly, yes. I really appreciate Lando the past few weeks. I think he's heard a lot of the criticism from people of it seems like he only blames the car and is unwilling to take the accountability of himself on himself. And we've seen a change in that. Lando has definitely been holding himself more accountable and admitting that he's made some input mistakes. And I think that's really important. It's important not to be over critical of yourself, but it is important to hold yourself accountable. And I'm glad that we're seeing that from him as opposed to a lot of talk about the car. I think that's a departure from what we saw the first couple rounds of this season.
Yeah, that's good. That is showing growth and maturity.
But yeah, that was. I think the other thing that, I mean, Isaac Hadjar. People are talking about like Kimi Antonelli as the rookie, obviously. People seem to be interested in talking a lot about Ollie Behrman as the impressive rookie too. But like Isaac Hadjar is a team leader right now in his 7th Grand Prix. It is incredibly impressive to watch. He is wiping the floor with Liam Lawson these past few races.
I don't think I heard Liam's name once on the broadcast.
Yeah, I mean, this year has been very tough for Liam. Very anonymous once he's left Red Bull. But yeah, anyway.
He's technically still with Red Bull.
Technically, but he's never sitting in that car again. The more time passes, the less surprised I will be if we see a different driver in that Racing Bull this year. Don't know who that will be. I mean, the only real guess could be Arvid Lindblad at this point. But if he's mounting a challenge for the F2 championship, don't know if they'll pull him out of that. He might. Yeah, you know what? He would. I don't think anybody would say, no, I want to finish F2 and not go to F1. So never mind. Anyway, should we move on to the race?
We shall.
You want to take this or?
Yeah, I mean, so you sent me a clip on Instagram before I watched the race, and I thought maybe I didn't realize what I was watching, but it was a hilarious.
You had
clip.
No idea that was turn 1, lap 1.
I had no idea. I I watched this clip and it was an onboard of Oscar.
No, it was on board of George.
Oh, it's on board of
Oscar.
George watching
And
Oscar, and it was
Max Verstappen's song was playing.
yeah, and it was like a fake quote from
No.
Toto,
Yeah.
and it was like I forget what it said specifically, but it's like the music you hear when you're passed by blah blah blah, and it's just like did it Max Verstappen, and then Max flies through. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Like, that must have been from whenever. I don't know. And then I'm watching the race, and immediately Max flies past both George and Oscar, which I was like, I knew Max won the race heading in. And I had fast forwarded a little bit on the ESPN broadcast and was like, trying to get to the beginning of the race, and I saw a replay of that pass by accident, and then I rewound, and I was like, wait a second. So I put the dot, I connected the dots, and I was like, okay, this is what I'm watching right now. Max didn't even get a good start. Like, it wasn't like anything, like it wasn't even a special start by any means. Because I was like, how did Max pass him that quickly? Like, so I was expecting Max to come flying through. Yeah, what was the quote? It was like, Toto, what's that music? And then it's just the Max Verstappen music playing. So good. So
it says, Toto, what's that music behind me? And then you see Max just
fly through
on the outside from nowhere.
And it's the Max Verstappen music. It's so good. I was shocked on how that first turn went. And I think Oscar. So I was texting
George,
you.
Yeah. So my take on it.
Yeah. What was your take? Because then I'll give mine.
George was incredibly quick off the line. Max was very slow. So I think what obviously Oscar was thinking is, I mean, because your first instinct in that situation is let me move over, cover second place, and take the racing line. But when you're seeing somebody get up to your gearbox in a span of a couple hundred meters, you're like, oh, crap, I can't go cover the outside. I've got to stay and cover George.
Right.
I think where the mistake happened was there was a certain point where Oscar had effectively stopped George's momentum. And he had an opportunity for a second to move over and cover off the outside, take that line, and shut the door on Max. And he didn't. And I think that's part of what Oscar acknowledged when he said, I made a mistake in that first corner. He said he broke too early. I think he would have preferred to be more in the middle of the track than on the inside. I think his positioning is partly why he had to brake so early. I know I texted you this. Because he was on the inside, in order to get stopped and be able to get any momentum out of the second part of the chicane, he had to brake early. He had no turning angle.
Which is just that's just a mistake.
Left the door open. Yeah.
That's just a mistake from Oscar. He's better than that. He should know where he is on the track, and he should know what's about to happen where he is on the track. You're leading this race. Maybe he's just never led at Imola before. He didn't realize what was about to happen. But Max saw an opening, and that's what world champions do. I think
also Max was so far back. We were texting, as you mentioned, and you said, what if he didn't know where Max was? I said, that's not possible.
Right.
Like when you're starting P1 and Max Verstappen starts P2, it is literally not possible for you to not know where he is going into turn one. That is at if the you forefront of your mind.
Yeah.
And I think he knew exactly where he was. I think he just thought he was way too far back to try anything. And
again, but you can't think like that when you're talking about Max Verstappen. Max is going to try. He's going to try anything. He's a lunatic.
I think also though that if Oscar had hit his normal breaking point, then it would have been nothing for Max to do.
Sure, yeah, but he didn't, and George was
No,
pissed.
it was a perfect
George
storm. Yeah,
George was pissed, and so we were talking. This is what I wanted to talk about. I was under the impression. I go, George was so mad at Oscar. He was like, "What the fuck is he doing?" That's what he literally said. What the fuck is he doing? And you were calling him crybaby, George. And you were like, he was putting on good defense, didn't push you onto the grass or anything, blah, blah,
and there's
blah.
a car with momentum coming behind you. Try to keep him behind.
I think it was not that. I think it was more he couldn't believe what Oscar was doing. And he couldn't believe how early Oscar was hitting the brakes. He couldn't believe the positioning that Oscar was in. And knew, like, if the roles were reversed, George would have been fine. George would have kept that lead and would have kept on driving. Now, Max's car was by far the fastest that day. And he would have won the race, I think, no matter what. I mean, it was Red Bull's 400th Grand Prix. I think I saw you post on our threads, like, we should have known.
The second, I genuinely did not know that until the post. Like, they said, like, towards, like, the middle or end of the race, like, and this is Red Bull's 400th Grand Prix. And I was like, are you kidding me? Why did we even discuss who was winning this race?
Yeah.
Like, there was never a chance for anyone else.
And Max, so, like, there was the restart, and Max still drove away later in the race. Like, it was never a question who was winning this race from the very first turn, which is crazy. Because Red Bull does not have that kind of car. Did they bring an upgrade package this week? Is that something that happened? Okay, so that has probably a lot to do with it, and that's scary for the rest of the grid.
I think we also have to stop talking about it as a bad car, because it's clearly a fast car. They're just struggling to keep it in the right window.
That, and also
it's just clearly fast.
It's a fast car, but only Max Verstappen can drive it.
I mean, Yuki also came through from 20th to 10th at Imola. That's a pretty damn good day.
Yeah, that's
not sure how much more you can expect at a track that's pretty difficult to pass with 2 free pit stop opportunities for cars ahead.
Yeah,
so
still a good day for Yuki.
Yeah,
but,
and I know it's how hard is it to pass. There were a ton of them today. You have to consider, you're able to pass, but only really in one spot. And that, as you're trying to work your way through the field, severely limits the opportunity of looking it up the grid.
And if you want to pass, and guys like Lewis mentioned it a lot, Oscar mentioned it during the race. If you want to pass, you have to eat through your tires, which is normal in any race, honestly. But here, especially with only one spot, they were saying Lewis like made a couple of passes late, and he was like, that really burned through my tires. I think Charles mentioned it at one point.
You really have to make sure you're tucked under the gearbox in Q3, which
yeah. So incredible race from Max.
Sublime.
Sublime. I have to look at the standings.
He's 22 back right now.
Yeah, so
he has 22 to Oscar. Oscar and Lando are separated by 13.
And
we got a real three-way fight right now.
And George is at 99 points, which is, that's great. Which you really love to see. I
think there's a fight for second eventually between Mercedes and Red Bull.
Yeah, well, hey, Ferrari's not far behind. They're at 114. This is a huge weekend for Ferrari, which we'll get to. But let's get back on track here. Another big storyline.
Obviously, the home retirement.
Our boy, your boy, especially Kimi retiring.
It was unfortunate. You could kind of hear it when he came on the radio. He said like he sounded heartbroken when he told the team there was a problem. It's tough. I mean, I'm not worried though. It's not one of the situations where you're like, oh, well, is he going to have a chance to score at home in the future? Like, yes, he is. he's going to probably score points in 4 months at home. So it's unfortunate, but there's more chances for Kimi in the future. And I think it's a great experience for him this weekend, just having been his first home race, going through all of that. And honestly, it might not be the worst thing for the first one to be disappointing.
Now he knows what to expect, and
if you go and podium in your first home race, the only way you can ever top that is by winning.
Yeah. So
leave something to look forward to, young guy.
Exactly. But it was interesting. So Kimi's incident was pretty similar to Esteban Ocon's, and they had just different results. What's going on with that? I mean, because that was incredibly impactful on how the race itself went, right?
It was, and they looked like very similar incidents. I can't remember exactly where each car stopped. I don't know.
Weren't they in the exact same place?
That's what I'm not positive of. I can't remember. I didn't go back to check right before this recording, but the only thing I can think of is Ocon might have been right there next to one of those like
doors
openings for the marshals, and they could have just pushed it through there real quick. From what I saw, it looked like they had to get like a vehicle, like an extraction vehicle, onto the track for Kimi's.
Yeah.
He might have pulled off onto the other side of the road, or just there wasn't an access route there, where an access road where he pulled off. But yeah, I mean, hey, it gave us great racing at the end. It bunched everybody up at the end. Think it would have been nice to have that the first time too. That way Max wasn't just 30 seconds ahead of everybody driving around for 20 laps. But that is what it is. That's racing. You can't control it.
Yeah. Damn. I mean, it's just real tough for Kimi. Just real tough for Kimi. But yeah, I mean, and these incidents changed everything. Well, at least the Kimi one did.
Yeah, I mean,
it was much more interesting.
That was really interesting in terms of strategy, because there were cars that had pitted before Ocon, right?
Lando,
there were cars
right?
that pitted before. No, there were cars that pitted before the Ocon safety car a lot. And then when that came out, some cars pitted again. Some of the cars that stayed out, that pitted before that, stayed out. Some of the cars that pitted before that came in with some of the cars that didn't pit before that. So had some cars on their second tires. There were some cars on their third tires after that. So there were a couple people when when that safety car came out that couldn't put fresh tires on. They didn't have fresh hards. They didn't have, Charles Leclerc, it was either we stay on these used hard tires or we put on a soft. And Ferrari wasn't convinced that their soft tire was getting to the end. So it turned into a really interesting tire strategy at the end of, do we stick it out on these used tires, or do we try something crazy here on a tire that couldn't even last one full qualifying lap?
Yeah.
And ultimately we saw Charles had pretty good pace at the end.
He did. I mean, his tires were
fighting that. He was fighting that Williams. And that, by the way, was a fascinating exchange where, Albon tried to pass him. Looked like he got past him on the straight. They were basically side by side coming into that first turn, and Albon went wide. And Charles kept it for a lap or two, and then was told, I think on the last lap, by his team to give the place back. And I mean, it was just like, I'm starting now to understand the frustration of some of these drivers of they're taking the racing out of it.
Which was such a stark difference
It
with what
was,
McLaren did this weekend, where they let Lando and Oscar race.
well, you had to.
Yeah.
You had to. And I think post-race comments kind of clarified all that. I don't think McLaren ever thought they had the pace to win the race. So they were never going to tell them to swap.
Right.
Especially with the tire difference, it was essentially a slam dunk for
But they
Lando to get by him.
But Ferrari let Lewis through. They were like, go, right?
Yeah, well, they were trying to get an extra position.
Yeah. And
They
Lewis
were
had
trying
much
to pass-
fresher tires.
They both were trying to pass the Williams. There was no way that they were catching Max 10 seconds up the road at that point.
No.
So I totally get it. And I think it's going to be interesting just again watching what McLaren decides to do later in the year. In 2007 there was a very similar situation where the two McLaren drivers were the front runners for the championship, and there was a third driver in the picture who was incredibly fast and picked up every possible piece that he could, every possible point, and that was Kimi Räikkönen. And Kimi ended up winning the championship that year because McLaren couldn't pick between their two drivers. They stuck to their two number ones, and as a result, they lost out on the World Drivers' Championship. So it's interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see in this day of commercialization of the Drivers' Champion and how much that's worth as well. What do they do at the end of the year? So I'm fascinated.
You made such a good point a couple of weeks ago about what the Drivers' Championship means and the Constructors' Championships means to certain teams. And I feel like what you said about Red Bull and how the Drivers' Championship means so much more to Red Bull than it does to every other team, because Red Bull is not a car brand.
They're only there to promote their drink.
Right.
That's why they're there. They're not there to sell more of their cars like Mercedes is.
And so when you think about like the Mercedes and McLaren and Ferrari,
they want their car to be the star.
Right.
So people go and want to buy their car.
Right. And I think other teams also, like I bet Williams, they're just a brand. They'll
take any championship they can get.
Yeah, and Haas, but Aston Martin, they want the Constructors' Championship over the drivers. They want to sell more Aston Martins. It's just it's so interesting, and I think that like McLaren, they obviously want their driver to win the Drivers' Championship. But it's so interesting that how much more it means to Red Bull than to everybody else to win that Drivers' Championship. And McLaren, they easily could just kind of fumble this because they can't make a decision when Red Bull is solely focused. They're putting 100% of their focus into making sure that Max wins the Drivers' Championship. And McLaren, at this point, they should be focused on having one of their guys win the Drivers' Championship because they have a 130-point lead in the Constructors.
I think it's still early for that. I think what's important is setting a target date early. Setting a target round of, all right, we're racing freely up until, I don't know, say Monza, which is the first week of September. I guess it's probably like around like 16 or 17 of 24. We're going to race freely up until then. At that Grand Prix, we're going to assess the situation between you guys and Max in the World Drivers.
And this is what you think.
Depending on that,
not what they're going to do.
Yes, this is what I probably would do. And depending on where that stands, how close Max is to you guys, if he's still a threat at that point, we're going to have to pick whichever driver is leading to throw the weight behind and secure the World Drivers' Championship for the team. And that, I think, is how you have to handle it. And you say, look, if we're in this situation next year, the same thing's going to happen. And whoever misses out, you go and make next year your year. That's how you have to do it.
Mhm.
You can't have room for feelings in Formula One. You have to be cutthroat. You have to go for the championship.
I do not envy Zach Brown at all for
No.
having to make
Or
this
Andrea
decision.
Stella. No,
Yeah.
it's an impossible choice.
Well,
Because it's two drivers who definitely are capable.
hopefully these guys make the decision for them and one of them pulls away. But with how it's been going, it's been pretty even. I mean, they're separated by 13 points right now. That's one race.
Yeah.
You know? So we'll see. We will see. Actually, it's
right.
two races if they go 1-2. But yeah, it's one of the most fascinating like subplots of this entire season of what McLaren's going to do, because the constructors is all but like they're going to win the constructors. It's all about wrapped up already, which is pretty crazy. If they keep this if they keep this pace up, which I believe they will. But this drivers' championship.
The other interesting thing though about the constructors this particular year is, when do all these teams turn it off for 2026? Because that can significantly impact points at the end of the year.
I mean, they all should.
That'll be interesting.
They like Williams, Haas, Aston Martin, Racing Bulls, Alpine, Kick all should
No,
be
but like
focusing on 2026 at this point.
Which top team turns it off first?
It should be Ferrari.
Because that's going to start exposing potentially some big points for the other teams. You know,
it should be
start
Ferrari.
On certain weekends.
Right?
Points that wouldn't have been available will now be available to other people when that happens.
Yeah, I like I just said, it should be Ferrari. They should be punting the rest of the season.
They should.
But
they're the
this
least
weekend,
consistent of the big four.
But this weekend they had a great weekend. So maybe they're like, maybe we have something here.
They had a confusing weekend.
They had a very
which I think has been the theme for Ferrari of on any given race weekend, either qualifying or race pace isn't there. It seems to always be one or the other, and they can't put both together. That is confounding. I would hate to be in that situation if I'm a team. I would rather know why I'm slow. And at the moment, it doesn't seem like they have figured it out. They're just kind of throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks.
Well, we have a home race coming up for one of them. So that'll be interesting.
Which, by the way, did you see that? At the end of that was flying around social media.
No.
In the media pen after the race, a reporter, and I think it was French, asked Charles, does this weekend give you hope for Monaco? And he just goes, nope, and walked away. They're like, do you think this gives you hope for Monaco? And he goes, nope, and walks away.
Amazing.
It's so perfect. Yeah.
But any other thoughts about Imola?
Yes, my arguably key takeaway, which I hit on before, was this was the first race for Aston Martin that they have upgrades that have come out of their new wind tunnel. This is a new wind tunnel in a new state-of-the-art facility built by Lawrence Stroll in Silverstone. And this, when you think back, when did McLaren's rise begin? Right? About the same time that they started using the new wind tunnel in Woking that they had built.
So you think this is a precursor for Aston Martin dominance?
I mean, Aston Martin had been using a 45-year-old wind tunnel. That it gets them almost impossible to work in outdated tools.
Yeah.
Like, you're trying to build these extremely high-tech machines in almost analog wind tunnels. It doesn't really work. And so giving some of these top engineers the right tools to do what they do, I think can really push that team forward. And especially with the feedback experience that Fernando Alonso has, I think the sky is the limit. I think we have to be careful about what we expect this year, but I think this is extremely promising for the work that Adrian Newey is doing for next year.
I didn't watch qualifying, as you know, but I saw that P5 and my jaw dropped. I couldn't believe that there was an Aston Martin that high up on, and we talked about this earlier during the qualifying talk, but
and Lance P8.
Yeah. And I mean, this was definitely a disappointing outcome race-wise for how they qualified. There was just a bunch of times where we saw Fernando and Lance get passed. I think that the restart also impacted. There was the both restarts and the strategies.
They had
how their race
a
went.
strategy thing.
But yeah, this was definitely encouraging. Definitely encouraging for Aston Martin. I love Aston Martin. I love the car itself, like the brand. It's James Bond. It's like they have the potential to be so huge. If they start winning championships, like crossovers with James Bond and all like this stuff, like they can be enormous. And like Aston Martin's always just been a sick car. Like it's always been a great brand. And I'm rooting for them. I am. I'm rooting for them to be good.
You know what happened to both Astons in this race? They both pitted but they both pitted before Ocon's VSC, and neither of them came in again when that happened. So they were on old tires when everybody else had
fresh
newer tires on after that. And then they came in when Kimi had to retire and put new tires on and got a little bit of that back.
And that ruined the weekend for them. Well,
yeah,
that's brutal for them after such a great qualifying session.
It was.
Yeah. But what last thing that we should touch on, Williams again, just giving them
not the last thing. There's other things that I want to talk about.
You got more. But all right. So then the next thing is giving Williams their flowers. Just again, we don't have to spend much time on them, but just it's so nice to see Williams being competitive week in and week out. I say it every single week, but I love Williams. I feel like I've said I love a lot of teams this episode, but there are a bunch of teams that I've been rooting for outside of McLaren. And
my little note on Williams, Alex Albon has finished P5 3 times in 7 races this year.
He's awesome.
Extremely good work. Good for them. I'm happy. I think they're probably among. If you're a fan of another team, I still don't think you dislike Williams. At this point, there's too much time between when they were a threat to anybody. I think that people are just rooting for them to get back.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So what I mentioned of things that I wanted to talk about, there was a bit of messiness on social media this week.
Okay.
It all involved fans of Franco Colapinto. And before we get into this, I want to be extremely clear that it is not all of Franco's fans. There is a segment of his fan base that is extremely toxic. And it sucks that it is kind of tarnishing, in a way, the reputation of the rest of his fan base, because I don't think the bad apples should represent the good apples. But I mean, there were 2 incidents this weekend regarding his fans on social media that just weren't acceptable. The first one came from when like I mentioned before, he impeded Yuki in FP1. Yuki gave a hand gesture, kind of what the hell. And his fans just started abusing him, calling him slurs, saying negative things about Japanese. It was disgusting. It was vile. Alpine had to make a statement. Franco made a statement. There's no room for that in racing. And as if that wasn't enough, this next one was kind of helped by almost an outside agitator. One of the popular Formula One meme accounts on social media, Formula Fakers. It's kind of a play on one of the popular news accounts, Formula Racers, they posted a fake Instagram story where Mick Doohan, Jack's 5-time MotoGP championship father, so 5-time MotoGP champion father of Jack Doohan, was made to look like he posted an Instagram story celebrating Franco Colapinto's crash in Q1, which came the first qualifying session after his son was replaced in the car. Clearly, Mick Doohan is not an ass of that proportion and did not do that. But that did not stop Franco fans from coming down incredibly hard on both him and Jack. Same type of abuse we've seen throughout the season on Jack, which is disgusting. You know, it's been talked about many times by Franco that he doesn't think it's right. And it almost makes you feel like these people, they're not fans if they won't respect their driver and respect his competitors. And it's really sad to see. There's no place in F1 for it. I think in the past few years, you've seen Formula One make some strides. Thanks to people like Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton of trying to be inclusive of everyone. And this is a huge black mark against that. And it's almost at the point where Formula One itself should be embarrassed for not taking more of an active role in stopping this. That's my soapbox speech on that.
Well said. Is the biggest thing I have to say. Well said. I agree with everything you said. Racism and hate have no place in not just motorsport, but
the world,
sport, and in the world in general. And it's just disappointing to hear that these
not just the
so-called fans, these so-called fans are disrespecting other drivers like that.
Yeah. And
if you want to hate on a driver,
Franco when they do it, because it makes Franco look
bad.
Horrible.
Yeah. If you want to hate on a driver in good fun and say this guy stinks,
there's a way
blah
to
blah
have
blah,
banter with drivers.
Yeah, like there's a way to do it. You don't need to bring race and hatred into any sort of conversation about Formula One or anything ever.
My recommendation is go watch some videos of baseball fans in the outfield heckling, a right fielder or a left fielder. Those are like good-natured hecklings, Yeah. A lot of time you see like the player turn around and laugh or wave or something.
There's that guy on social media who like goes to like baseball games and sits in left field and heckles the right fielder. And like it's like all like normal stuff, and it's like his goal is to get the right fielder to break, and it's great. Yeah. That's the sort of content we should be looking for.
Stupid shit like, oh, so and so doesn't like butter on his popcorn. Like,
yeah, exactly. So again, no hate and racism has no place in sports and in life and anything, and. I mean, we could say all we want, like Colapinto fans be better. They're not, these people that are saying these things, they're not going to be better. They're going to keep on doing this. And as long as Franco Colapinto is denouncing them, and Formula One and Alpine and whatever teams that are going through this are denouncing them, that's all you can do. Because there's going to be hatred in the world. That's just kind of how it is. And you can try and educate these people all you want. In my experience, if you have hate in your heart, you have hate in your heart, and it's worth it to try and change their minds and change their viewpoints. But more times than not, they're just, this is how they are, and it sucks. And nothing you can do.
Yep, I agree. All right, last thing that I want to discuss, and we'll wrap this up with a little happier note. Indy 500. Indy 500 qualifying was this weekend. It was a fantastic double feature with that and Imola. But I mean, huge news coming out of Indianapolis. And Prema Racing, which I think a lot of people in the F1 world are familiar with because of their incredible track record in the junior formulas. Most of your favorite drivers have driven for Prema at one point, coming up the ladder. They've won like 40 championships in Europe. It's pretty crazy. They're for the first time, they're a rookie team in IndyCar this year. So for the first time, they're at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Robert Schwartzman, their rookie driver, was Formula 3 champion with Prema, a Formula 2 title contender, was Ferrari's F1 reserve driver for a couple years, and then went and raced in the World Endurance Championship for the number 83 Ferrari customer team. So this is somebody who has a lot of racing experience. However, at the same time, until this week, or until the month of May, he had never driven on an oval before in a race car. The way that the Indy 500 works is the first week of May, they have practice. They have like rookie orientation. So that was the first time he ever drove on the track. Keep in mind, they're not putting in qualifying laps. They're not going full out. They're getting used to the feel. Then they had the Indianapolis road race, and then in the week between, and then all this past week they had practices. So this was his chance to get comfortable, if you can do that on a track going 230 miles an hour. And so this was his chance to get comfortable. And then they rock up on Friday for qualifying, or they rock up on Saturday for qualifying, and it comes out that they decided not to change their car at all from the final practice day. He was happy with how it felt and said, leave it. There's no point of trying to make it better. We won't know what it's going to do until we get out there. So they left it. He gets out there, and at the time of his run, he put his car third on the timing screen. He ended up getting bumped down to fifth, but the way IndyCar works, the top 12, they advance. They drive again to go into the top 6. And top 6 is like their Q3. And he made it into the top 6. In the top 6, it was him, Alex Palou, who is the world beater in an IndyCar right now. You've got Scott Dixon, who is essentially the Lewis Hamilton or Michael Schumacher IndyCar. They won 7 championships. He's won like 65 races. He's unbelievable. He's 44 years old, still as fast as anybody. So like you had him going up against some of the greats. You had Takuma Sato, who has won 2 Indy 500s. You had Pato O'Ward, who has finished top 5 in 3 of the last 5 Indy 500s. So like he was going against the top racers in this series or at this track. And what does he do? He goes out, and if you're unfamiliar with how Indy qualifying works for the Indy 500, they do 4 laps, and they use the average speed over those 4 laps. So he goes out in the first lap and is the only car of the day, or only car in the top 12 to go 233 miles per hour on average on the first lap. It was unbelievable. He went 0.6 miles an hour faster on average over a lap than anybody else. And nobody could believe what they were seeing. You had Will Buxton losing his mind in the broadcast booth because, put this in perspective, Cadillac next year comes into Formula One. They show up at Monaco, the crown jewel of this sport. First time that Cadillac is racing in Monaco. First time setting up a car for the track. and they put it on pole. It's mind blowing. It doesn't make sense. And go one step further. We're expecting Cadillac to have two experienced drivers, two drivers who've raced at Monaco before. This is a kid who, until this month, had never been to Indianapolis, let alone Indiana. Like it's an unbelievable story.
Defies all logic, is what you're telling me.
Yes.
That's incredible. And so the Indianapolis 500 is this upcoming weekend, right?
Yes. And also, like, Prema had been nowhere this year. Prema had struggled all season. It'd be like if this year, like, if Sauber did something crazy like that. It really, like, is unbelievable.
Wouldn't that be something if Sauber just got put on pole in Monaco? It's Nico Hulkenberg. Wow. Yeah, I'll be. I may. I'm not an indie guy, but I may watch a little bit of the 500 this weekend. We'll see. You've gotten me more interested than I've ever.
By the
been.
way, this coming Sunday, if you're a true racing fan, don't care the kind of racing. If you love racing, my God, is there any better day? Wake up. First, you've got the Monaco Grand Prix. When that ends, you have the Indy 500. And then when that ends, you have the Coca-Cola 600 in NASCAR. And this year, once again, just like last year, there's a driver, Kyle Larson, who
I know who Kyle Larson is.
Stirred the pot a little bit because some Americans like saying that he's a better driver than Max Verstappen, which I'm backing myself right out of that argument.
He's not. I don't even watch NASCAR. He's not better than Max.
Yeah, no.
No one's better than
I'm
Max.
not even willing to touch it because they've never driven remotely the same type of cars. But anyway, he's trying to do the double, which he tried last year, but there was rain in Indy and it delayed him. He wasn't able to make it to Charlotte in time. But this man is going to try to drive 1,100 miles of races in a day. He's going to go drive 500 miles in Indianapolis and then 600 miles in Charlotte. And I cannot wait to see him attempt this.
How much of a time gap is there between these races?
That's a great question. Give me a second to look it up.
Bad radio.
It is, but I'm not an encyclopedia.
No. That's just what I like to say when there's a long pause in the action. Sometimes you got to look stuff. Sometimes you got to look stuff up. Yeah.
All right. So Indy is at 12 o'clock Eastern time, and Coke 600 is at 6 p.m. Eastern time.
And Monaco's early. Monaco's like 8, 9.
Yeah, Monaco.
Because it's a 3 o'clock race in Monaco time. 3:30.
I think it's probably 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
Yep, 9 a.m.
I will be ready and watching that. My whole family will be watching that, actually.
So
which is incredible.
I will be locked into about 12, 14 hours of racing that day, and I don't mind. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
But,
plus, you get the Knicks at 8 o'clock. It's going to be great.
Yeah, but like for any Europeans listening to this, it essentially is like driving a race at driving like a 500-mile race at Silverstone, hopping in like a helicopter or a private jet, flying to like Barcelona and doing another 600 miles there. It's mind-blowing.
It's crazy. That's going to be unbelievable. That's like Deion Sanders playing in the World Series and then playing in an NFL game in the same day.
Yeah. Yes.
Monaco. Next week. This weekend. The crown jewel.
Shit.
It's gonna be a movie. I'm especially excited for this race. And that's because I walked the track last week. I was in Monaco. I've never felt so poor in my life. I've never felt so small and insignificant in my life. And that was a week before the race. In the south of France, you have Cannes Film Festival going on and the Monaco Grand Prix going on within a week and a
Place
half.
to be right now.
It's the place to be if you're super wealthy. Which is, I walked past Quentin Tarantino when I was walking the track, which is like, I've never been that close to somebody so famous before in my life. His head is huge, if you're wondering. It's gigantic.
Must be a big star.
He's a big star.
Turtle said so in episode 1 of Entourage. Bigger the head,
right.
bigger the star.
That's right. That's right. Monaco is amazing. It was an experience unlike anything I've ever been through.
Whoa. We're getting dangerously close to the Masters right now. An experience unlike any other.
Well, all right.
We're one word away from copyright.
Yes. Sorry. No, it's just, and this wasn't even race week, but the whole track was set up, and we did a walk the track tour, and we walked it's like 3.3 kilometers, I think.
Sounds about right.
And we walked the entire track. We had a history lesson for each turn, each corner, where Senna got out and walked his apartment, where Kimi Räikkönen got out and partied with the boats,
yacht.
went to the yachts, through the tunnel. It was
killing 2 people, himself and another driver.
Yep. Yeah, it was a fascinating day getting to walk the track in Monaco. And now, like, my mom wants to watch the race. She doesn't watch F1, but she's like really excited to watch the Monaco Grand Prix. I'm like, Ma, I'm really happy you're excited, but it's gonna be a pretty boring race. Whoever gets
not the right one to be the first race.
Whoever so like I'm gonna be like, all right, Saturday morning.
Make sure she watches
wake up.
Coda.
Yeah, no, we'll gotta make sure she watches qualifying, because that's the excitement for Monaco.
But speaking of qualifying, who do you think is going to come out on top?
So, before this race in Imola, I thought it was going to be Oscar, because he's been the fastest driver all year. I don't know what to think now because of how freaking fast Max looked, and I don't necessarily know if this is a track that's good for Ferrari's car. So I'm not going to go with Max, and I may not even go with McLaren here. I think I'm going to go with George Russell.
Interesting. Okay.
And
I was kind of thinking he might be strong there.
And it's not anything to do with there's no like specific reason I have, because like in theory it should be the McLarens. It should be Max. They've been the fastest all season. It just feels George has been so consistent, and I do like Ferrari's car. They've had a good car all season, and this just feels like he could steal one. He just needs one great lap. And he's been one of the best drivers on track, and I'm just going out on a limb here, and I'm picking George.
Okay. I think it's a McLaren. I think all year they've been the best car in low speed. I think Mercedes is probably next on the pecking order there. I know they did a lot to try to address low speed issues. I just worry about the Red Bull there. I think that with the problems that they've described this year with grip and their turning abilities, understeer, oversteer, I think some of these slow long corners and the tight walls can pose problems for them. I think the Ferrari is a disaster of a car this year that neither of those drivers feels comfortable with, and as a result of that, they're going to be way off the pace. They won't feel like they can really push it. So yeah, I think I think it's going to be Oscar on pole. I do.
Yeah, I mean that's if that happens,
and that
that
just comes
that feels
down.
expected.
That just comes down to the qualifying woes of late for Lando. This isn't necessarily the place you expect somebody to show up and fix their qualifying issues. So
No, it's not. This is
so like I wouldn't be surprised to see Oscar 1, George 2, and then Lando or Max 3.
Yeah. That would be
The same time though, if these upgrades for Aston were legit, watch out for another top 5 start for Fernando. We
that'd be
remember
so
what
fun. That'd be
we
so much
remember
fun.
what he did in Monaco a few years ago, right?
No. Remind me.
That you remember that incredible final lap showdown between Max, Charles, and Fernando, where in the span of like 45 seconds, 3 different drivers were sitting on provisional pole. It was absolutely incredible. And it's one of Max's greatest qualifying performances, his Q3 at Monaco, that people will talk about forever. He came in like a tenth and a half or 2 tenths down coming into sector 3 and ended up on pole, which is like that type
Yeah.
of time doesn't exist in S3. But yeah, I think it first was Charles came through, set the provisional time, and then I think Alonso came through, took it away from him, and then Max came and took it away from
Took it away
Fernando.
from him.
It was unbelievable stuff.
Yeah. I don't remember it. You are the encyclopedia here, but it would be amazing if Fernando could be competitive the rest of the season. The sport's just better when Fernando Alonso is relevant. I'd love to see it. And like I said, I was singing Aston Martin's the brand's praises. I'd love to see them be relevant. So the more success we can see from Fernando Alonso, the better. But yeah, it was Monaco's amazing. I'm excited to watch because I'd just be like, oh yeah, I walked there. I walked there. I was there. And just seeing the whole setup, Red Bull's barge that they have to clear out the marina basically for them.
Yeah, their energy station.
Yeah, like they're not even in the paddock. They just do their own thing. But it would be awesome to see Aston Martin be competitive there. I would love to just see something a little different. You know, I mean, we've seen McLaren and Mercedes and Red Bull dominating. Maybe like a Williams shows up and does something crazy.
Welcome to F1. It's cyclical in nature.
It is. It is. I would just, I'm just like maybe Alexander Albon does something a little crazy this week. That'd be lovely to see.
I
Am I
don't think
expecting
it's
it?
the track for them.
I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, I'd love to see. I'd love to see Lewis show out. But like you said, Ferrari is just probably not going to be there. This is Charles's home track. He did win last year. So you never want to count him out. But again, he said himself that he's not expecting anything crazy. But Monaco is always fun just because of all the pageantry and the how stupid rich everybody is and shows up and just the scenes itself. It's the only true city like street course remaining. I mean, I guess Vegas, right? Vegas counts. But
Baku.
yeah. Is it through the streets in Baku?
Yes.
Yeah. So, but this is like the OG.
They go like right in front of like the government building. I'm pretty sure. Azerbaijan.
Oh my God. Yeah. But yeah, I'm excited for Monaco. It's gonna be awesome. And
Singapore too. It's also through the streets.
is it really?
Yeah. I mean, Australia too.
No, Australia is like in the
It's just
park.
like a park, but
Yeah.
it's still public roads that are used regularly. Like Miami is a street course that isn't like public roads, you know?
Right.
Like cars don't drive on those roads. Like it's not like a
Unless there's
4-lane
a
road that
Dolphins
they
game.
put walls on, you know?
Yeah. But this is the iconic race. I'm excited for it. And it should be a good qualifying session. The race itself will be boring.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we hope not, but probably will.
yeah. Any final thoughts?
No. We got my final thoughts out.
All right, folks, that's it for us. Thanks for tuning in. As always, we'll be back next week to break down Monaco qualifying, and the race itself, of course. Though qualifying will be the race, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah. You have any thoughts?
I got
Final
head
thoughts?
empty. Head empty. No thoughts.
No, okay. I thought you would have said bing bong.
Oh, bing bong. Go Knicks. Peace.